Hello everyone, welcome back for the third lesson of Basics of Deep Learning. So today the lesson will be decomposed in mainly two parts. The first part, which I'm starting now, will be mostly theoretical, and the second part will be a bit more practical. So in the first part we will see how to choose your loss to do classification, and in the second part we will see different optimizers. So here is a quick overview of what we did so far. So in the first lesson we had an overview of the full deep learning pipeline. Last time we saw how to deal with PyTorch tensors and how PyTorch enables us to do automatic differentiation. So we are able to compute automatically gradients with respect to the parameters of the model. So now we'll see a next crucial building block for deep learning, which are namely losses. So how do you choose a loss? And optimizer. How do you choose an optimizer to update your weight? So here is again a picture of the full deep learning pipeline. So last time what we saw correspond to these red arrows. We saw that PyTorch allows us to do automatic differentiation, so to compute gradient of the loss with respect to the parameters. And once you have this gradient, you can update the parameters to make the classifier better and better. But so far, we did not discuss how to choose the loss, and we did not discuss how to update the parameter. So this is what we will do today. We will look namely at first the loss and then the various optimizers which are available to you. So let's start with the loss, how to choose a loss. So for this, to explain where losses are coming from, I will start from basics of supervised machine learning, and I will go back to the linear regression that we saw last time. I'll go back very briefly about the gradient descent algorithm. We'll go more into detail into this question in the second part of this lesson. Then I will go to logistic regression and how it's related to classification and softmax regression. So you are probably familiar with linear regression, but it's a good way to introduce also all the vocabulary which is used in machine learning and deep learning literature. So I will start with a probabilistic model which is given to me, and the first thing I need to have access to is a dataset which is made of training examples. So a training example in a supervised setting is a set of couples of features, the x, and target, the y. So here everything is real valued, but the x will be from dimension, any dimension, whereas the target is just a real number. So I'm making a strong assumption that I'm able to compute the y as a function of the x according to this formula, where theta is the parameter of the same dimension as the feature space, and epsilon I is a Gaussian random variable, a real one, okay, with mean 0 and variance sigma square. So IID here means independent and identically distributed Gaussian random variables. So one thing you can do in order to estimate the theta, if you have only access to the dataset, is compute what is called the likelihood, which is basically the probability distribution of the y knowing the x. So in this case, there is only one source of randomness, which is in this Gaussian noise, the epsilon. So you can write the likelihood in great details. So this is a product. This is a product because I'm taking an IID sequence for the noise. And here you see the distribution of the Gaussian random variable with a mean which is what you want to estimate, theta times x divided by the twice the variance. Okay. So now you know that this is your likelihood, but you don't know the theta. So your task is to try to find the theta from the training examples xi and yi. So one way to do that is try to maximize the likelihood or the log likelihood. This is the same thing because taking the log will not change the maximization problem. But taking the log will change the product into a sum, which makes analysis much easier. So you see that the log likelihood is made of a constant term, so you don't care about this term for the maximization, plus this term here, as a function of theta. So now if you want to maximize the log likelihood, you want to note that there is a minus here, you want to minimize the sum of the square. So this is my cost function, which is just the sum of the square of the differences between the true value and my current estimate given my parameter theta. So this is what is called the ordinary least square regression model. In order to solve this, what we did last time is we did compute the gradient of this cost function with respect to the parameter, which here are the theta. I want to minimize this as a function of theta. So if you want to do the math, the full formula is written here. So here is my gradient, so the derivative of my cost function with respect to the parameter theta g, which is the g's component of theta. So what we did in the last lesson is what we call a batch gradient descent. So we are following the gradient, which is given by this formula, in order to update each of my parameters with alpha, a learning rate, which gives you the step size you are doing each time you are following the gradient. So what we saw is that here you have a sum over all the samples in your training dataset in order to make only one update of your data. So what you did in the practicals of last lesson is a variation of this gradient descent, which is called stochastic gradient descent, where instead of taking the true gradient of your loss function, you are just replacing it with an approximation of it, which is given by this. So how you obtain this approximation from the true gradient, you will see that what you want is only look at one sample and compute the gradient associated to this sample. So the only thing you are doing is removing this sum here and just fixing the sample I in this expression. And this gives you this formula with a new update for your gradient. Now, each time you have a new sample, you are making an update of your parameters, and you will go over all your data sets. So this is why there is a for loop here, in order to look at all the samples in your data set to make iterative update of your parameter theta. Okay, for those who are familiar with linear regression, it might be puzzling to do all this stuff because it is well known that we can solve explicitly. There is a formula which is given here, mathematical formula which is given here, for the optimal parameter theta solving the optimization problem. So this is a very simple problem with a quadratic loss, and you can show, this is left as an exercise, that if the rank of this matrix, which is the matrix containing all the features, if this rank is full, so it's D, where D is less than N, then you can invert this matrix and obtain the theta star with this formula. So in other words, if you are able to do this inversion of matrix, which might be big, optimization is useless. But still, inverting a large matrix is not an easy task, so even in an optimization technique can be used in order to deal with this issue. Anyway, here we are in a very simple framework where you can show that the cost function is convex. So the optimization algorithm that I just described, gradient descent or stochastic gradient descent, will work perfectly fine. And indeed, we use linear regression in order to understand how PyTorch is doing automatic differentiation so far. Okay, so here is a small excerpt of the notebook from last lesson, where remember the feature add dimension 2. I want to predict a real number, so the output is 1. So I need to estimate two parameters, which is a linear layer, which corresponds to a matrix multiplication. So here I'm cheating a little bit because in the linear layer there is an additional bias, so which would correspond to my setting where you are adding one dimension to x corresponding to this bias. Now the loss is so-called MSE loss in PyTorch, mean square error loss. You define an optimizer, so if you SGD for stochastic gradient descent, and you want to update the model parameters with a given learning rate, and this is the training. For each epoch, you see what is the current prediction made by your model, you compute your loss, and here is the magic of PyTorch. You do optimizer 0 grad to put all the gradient to 0, loss backward in order to compute the gradient, and optimizer step in order to update your weight. So this is the easy part, but indeed what can take a little bit of time when you are debugging your own code is this piece. So remember that in the last lesson we started from a NumPy implementation of regression, so all the dataset was in NumPy, and you have some perhaps not completely obvious piece of code which you need to be careful with. So first you need to put all your tensor into float tensors, which I mean is not done by default if your initial NumPy array is containing int, for example. And the other perhaps thing you will not be familiar with, at least at the beginning, is this unsqueeze1. So what is unsqueeze1 doing? It's adding a dimension to y. So y is just a vector of the target, the labels. So typically, if you are dealing with batch, you are taking one batch of the targets, so the dimension by default is just batch size, and that's it. But if you want to use the MSE loss of PyTorch, then MSE loss is expecting something of the shape batch size and a dimension 1. Which mathematically does not make any difference with just a vector of size batch size, but is important in order for your code to run. So this unsqueeze one is just adding this, if you want, dummy dimension to your y vector. So let's move on to logistic regression. So logistic regression is the easiest kind of task where you try to predict now a category instead of a real number. So you need to first modify your probabilistic model, and this is what I'm doing here. So now let's start simple and look at only two classes. So the target y can only take two values, 0 or 1. For example, 0 will correspond to dogs and y correspond to cats. So your task now is, given x, which might be an image, try to predict what is the probability that this image is actually an image of a cat or an image of a dog. Okay, so we'll start with a very simple linear model. So linear means that you want to apply a linear function on the input x, so this theta scalar x. But of course, this is x are just real numbers, theta are real numbers, so this is just a real number, which might be negative, so it cannot be a probability. So the first thing you do is you normalize this number in order to get something between 0 and 1. So this is done here with the logistic function, which is also sometimes called a sigmoid function, which maps the real numbers to the interval 0, 1. So this quantity will now be between 0 and 1, so it can be interpreted as a probability. And of course, since you have only two labels, the probability of y to be 0 when you see image x is just 1 minus this quantity. So here, I'm making a small pause on notations because we are using notation which were developed first by people in information theory, and which are not the default notation if you follow a probability course, for example. So what is a bit puzzling first is that a function here is defined by its argument. So I will use the same p each time I'm looking at a probability distribution, and the argument x will tell me which random variable I'm considering. So p of x corresponds to what you will write in the probability course as the probability that the random variable big X is equal to x. P of y is not the same function of p here. This is the distribution of the random variable big Y. Okay, so you see that you get much shorter notation than what you are used to in a probability course, and it turns out it's very convenient to write rather long formula. So things you can write are things like that. So again, it's always the p is saying, it's telling you that you are looking at probability distribution, and if you pass a couple as an argument, this is just the joint distribution of the couple of the random variable big X and big Y. Now, here a more fancy notation. This is the probability of y knowing x, which corresponds to the probability of the distribution of the random variable big Y knowing big X. So let's say everything is discrete. So in this case, you know by Bayes' formula that this is simply the ratio of the probability that big X is equal to small x and big Y is equal to small y, divided by the probability that big X is equal to x. Okay? So this is also called the marginal of this distribution, which is just the sum over y of the pxy. So these are the notation which are used in most paper in deep learning, though this is important to understand it. So for example, if you go back to our model here, you can write it in a very compact way. So the distribution of y knowing x as a function of the parameter theta is this quantity, where sigma is the sigmoid function, and you see that y is equal either to 0 or 1, so if y is equal to 0, this term will disappear, and you will obtain only this term, and if y is equal to 1, this term will disappear, and you will obtain only this term, which is exactly this formula. Okay, so now we have our model, and like in the linear regression, what we want to do is estimate the parameter theta from samples, from the dataset. So let's do the same thing as what we did in linear regression. We can write the likelihood function. So again, I'm assuming that everything is IID. So this is why I have a product over my sample, and this is just the distribution here I showed you before. Now I'm taking a log to transform this product in sum. And you see that I'm obtaining this sum, where remember yi is either 0 or 1, so indeed in each of these terms there is only one of these two log which will be computed. If y is equal to 0, only this term is computed. If y is equal to 1, only this term is computed. So now again I want to compute the most probable parameter theta for my model. So I want to maximize this likelihood. Here there is no closed form formula for the parameter theta, as in the linear regression. So what you can do is use an iterative algorithm. So you can follow exactly the same step as in the linear regression. Compute the gradient of your new loss with respect to the parameter. So this is given here. And then you will make either stochastic gradient descent or batch gradient descent to update the parameter. So the rest is completely the same as before. So here I want to concentrate on losses. So how do you code this in PyTorch? So there are basically two ways to do that. The first one is using this binary cross-entropy loss. So the binary cross-entropy loss is computing this quantity. So each loss I here is exactly one term here. So you see that you want this z high to be the sigmoid times your linear model. So if you are using the binary cross-entropy loss, you need to have a linear model, then apply a sigmoid, and then use the binary cross-entropy loss. There is another way to do that, which is basically already computing the sigmoid inside the log, and just taking then the sum. So this is called BCE with log its loss. And here is the connection between the two, BCE with log its loss and BCE loss. And by the way, if you want to see the documentation, it's here. So BCE loss is here. And you have exactly the formula I show you with more details. And BCE with log its loss is written here. And you see that this version is more numerically stable than using sigmoid followed by BCE loss. So why is that? Remember that in the sigmoid there is you are taking an exponent here. So each time you are taking an exponent, you have to be careful when you have either very big numbers or very small number. High absolute value, positive or negative, because then the function is basically very close to 0 and 1, and you can make errors. So this is why there is a trick which is written here, the log sum exponential trick, which is used in BC binary cross entropy with logits loss by PyTorch. But mathematically, they are the same. One last thing is, by default, if you look at the documentation, you see that here that reduction is equal to mean. So mean, the same thing as average, which translate here is this average over the samples. So you have to be a little bit careful about this, because remember that then you will take gradient with respect to this loss. So if you are multiplying your loss by a factor, this will multiply your gradient by the same factor. Typically, M here is the size of a batch. So you see that when you are doing your update, you are taking the average over your batch, and then you are multiplying with the learning rate. So basically, there is a connection between the learning rate and this mean factor that you need to keep in mind when you are doing your computation. So if you did the last practicals and you play a little bit with the code, you saw that when you increase the size of the batch, since we didn't take an average, it's resulted in a very different result for the gradient descent. So here, it's probably wise to take always the average, because it will not change your result when you are changing the size of the batch. Okay, so this is for binary variable, the y. But we are interested in cases where you might have more than two classes. And here is a natural extension of the model to more than two classes. So you will have now one parameter theta per class, and the assumption you are making is that the log of the probability of y being of class k given an image, let's say, is proportional. So this is the meaning of this symbol, to a linear function of your image, where the parameter theta depends on the class k. So now you have not only one parameter to estimate, but c different parameters to estimate, theta 1, theta c, where c is the number of classes. And each parameter theta 1, theta c is of dimension, the dimension of x, your feature. So if you make this assumption, this means that you have an explicit formula for the probability of y being of class k given an image x. It's proportional to this exponent, and you need to renormalize it in order to get a probability, so something which is between 0 and 1. So this function is called the softmax function. So why is that? It's because if all the theta here are high, you see that this softmax function will concentrate on only the maximal x. Okay, so this is a soft version of the max. So now the vector of probability, which is a vector of size c, again, c is the number of classes, is obtained by applying a softmax function to this vector of dimension. Each number here is a real number. So this is a vector of size c, the number of classes. Okay, just to see how it connects with what we saw before. For binary classification, we had two classes, but we had only one parameter. Here, for two classes, we have two parameters, theta1 and theta2. So if you rewrite the probability that y is equal to 1 knowing x in this framework, you have theta1 and theta naught, corresponding to the classes 1 and 0. It's very easy to see that you obtain exactly the same function as before, so the sigmoid applied to theta times x, where theta is just the difference of the parameter. So you only have 1 degree of freedom. So softmax regression is just an extension of logistic regression to more than two classes. Okay, so again, for the softmax regression, you can write the log likelihood explicitly. So this is a sum of terms, and each time you have only one term here in this big sum over the samples, which is non-zero, because this function is equal to 1 only when yy is equal to k, and this is a given probability, and you take the log. Okay, so this is the log of softmax function, and you are looking only at one component of this softmax function corresponding to the true class. So you can code this in PyTorch very easily. The first thing you do is you take a log softmax function at the end of your network. So this will give you the log of this quantity, component-wise. And then, to compute the loss given by this, you can use what is called the NLL loss. So if you want to know what the NLL loss is doing, you can look at the documentation here. So NLL means negative log likelihood loss. So this is exactly what we are doing. This is the log likelihood. And here is an explicit formula. So xn of yn, so the x is the log probability, and you are just looking at the component yn. So this is exactly the same formula as this one. So this is to do softmax regression, but most of the time we are not interested in softmax regression. We are not really interested in knowing what is the probability that this image is a cat or a dog. We want to do a classification. We want to decide whether this image is an image of a cat or an image of a dog. So in order to do that, it's very easy. If you have access to the probability, what you do is you decide which class this image belongs to by just looking at the maximum probability. So this is what is written here. So if you are dealing with a linear model, you are just taking the argmax of the theta1 times x, theta c times x, where x is your new image, and the theta1, theta c have been learned by stochastic gradient descent doing the softmax regression. So again, we already did that actually at the very first lesson, because we computed the features corresponding to images of cats and dogs. Then we pass it to through a linear layer. So the original size of the feature was this, 4096. I want to do binary classification here. So I'm outputting a probability for being a cat, a probability for being a dog. So this is not a probability, this is a real number. So I'm passing it through a log softmax. So y dimension 1 here, because in the log softmax, here there is a sum to normalize the probability. So I don't want to normalize across my batch. I want to normalize for each sample individually. So this is why I'm averaging here with dimension equals to 1. Remember that dimension equals 0 is the batch size. And now you can use NNL loss and start to learn. So this is again the code that is taken from the first lesson, and now you should be able to understand the training. So the model was defined before. You define a criterion which is NLL loss, a given learning rate, the optimizer which is SGD for your classifier. Okay, number 6 is this one. At a given learning rate. Then the training is done. The training loop is done in this function. You are running for several epochs. Then you are looking at all your data sets. So we didn't see yet how data loader is working, but this will give you a batch of inputs on the corresponding classes. You compute the current prediction made by your model on the input. You compute the loss. Then you put to 0 all the gradients. You compute the gradient in the loss backward, and you do an optimizer step. This will update the parameter of your network, actually only the last layer. And if you want to make prediction, because you want to do classification, you are just looking at the maximum output of your prediction. And you see the accuracy is given here when your prediction is equal to the true class. So at this point, it might be a bit disturbing to see that actually what we care really about is accuracy, which is how many good predictions we are making. But this is not what we are using in the training stage of our network. The loss here is the negative log likelihood loss. So would it be possible to optimize directly what we care about, namely the binary classification task? So you can rewrite the binary loss as this formula. So this is just counting the number of errors you are making on your dataset. So in the case of here, it's in the case of binary, the y can only be 0 or 1. So it turns out that it's not at all a good idea. One of the reasons is that this function as a function of theta is completely flat. Okay, there is a jump, but it's completely flat in terms of theta. So if you compute gradient, you will find zeros everywhere, and it's not well defined at one point. So you cannot use such a function in order to do a gradient descent for sure. So one way to interpret what people are doing in deep learning is using the softmax regression as a proxy for this binary class minimization. So far we only dealt with a linear model, which are nice because you can show even in the logistic regression that you obtain convex function of your parameter theta. So you are sure that these functions are easy to optimize. Now we are moving to a deep learning framework, and we are following basically the same steps as before, but now we are not making the assumption that the model is linear anymore. Instead of this, we will assume that the model is well approximated by a neural network with various layers. So this is what is written in this formula. Now you interpret the output of your possibly complicated neural network, f theta of x, as the log of the probability that y belongs to 1 for the first component, y belongs to c for the sixth component. So your neural network takes as input, let's say, an image x, do a lot of computation through different layers, and at the end will output a vector of size c, where c is the number of classes, and we interpret each of these components as the log of the probability of belonging to the given class, computed by the algorithm. So now, if you make this interpretation, you are back in a softmax regression. So what you want to do, you have the log of the probability, you pass this to a log softmax, and you apply the NNL loss in order to update your parameter. So this is what is done in practice, and the parameters are updated thanks to this NNL loss, and then again for the accuracy, you are just taking the max of your prediction here in order to make a prediction for a given class. So now I want to show you on this simple Jupyter notebook what can go wrong in this setting. Okay, so I did prepare a small Jupyter notebook that you can open to try to explain what is happening. So in the presentation of the linear regression, I made a very strong assumption, namely I knew that my model was linear like this. So when I'm computing the likelihood here, okay, I'm making the right choice for my function here, and in the cost function, I know that this function needs to be linear in the input x. So I need to only look at the parameter theta. But in real life, you don't have access to this. So I will go back to the regression because it's easier to understand on this simple model. But I will remove this assumption that I know that the underlying model is linear. So to make life a bit more interesting, I'm also considering a model which is a bit more complicated. So this model will be now the output y is a polynomial applied to the feature x plus some noise. So here is a picture of what you are obtaining. So you see that I'm taking a polynomial of degree 3 and I'm adding some Gaussian noise here. Then I'm sampling my data set, which are the blue points here, and the true model is given by my curve here. So now I only have access to the blue points here, and the task is to estimate the polynomial here. So, okay, let's do what we did before. We define a quadratic loss. So here I'm modifying slightly, I'm just taking the average of the square. This is a function of p, where p is any polynomial. And I want to minimize this loss, and this is very easy to do in Python with this polyfit stuff. And you see, here is what I'm obtaining. So in blue is the true polynomial, and in orange is your estimation. You see that the orange curve is passing through all your points. So you are very happy because for sure the quadratic loss is 0. But it doesn't seem right. I mean, it looks like you are passing through all the points, but you are not capturing at all the pattern which is given by this polynomial of degree 3. So, okay, the first thing you can do is cheat a little bit and do as what we did before in linear regression. Namely, we are looking only at polynomial of degree 3. And you see that now the orange curve is a much better fit to your point, even so it doesn't pass through all your data points. Now you can modify the degree. So if I'm taking degree 4, I'm doing something like this. Degree 5, something like this. So all this looks good. But if I'm taking a degree 2, okay, this is not good. The quadratic function is not a good fit. Okay, if I'm taking degree 1, okay, a line is not a good fit either. But you see that between degree 3, this one, degree 5, this one, it's not very easy to decide which one is the best. So now you have a new task, which is first you need to decide what is the degree of the polynomial you want to estimate. And second, once this degree is fixed, you can try to estimate the parameter of the polynomial. So one natural way to do that is to say, okay, I will first look at all polynomial of degree 1, then all polynomial of degree 2, 3, 4, and so on. Each time I'm making the best estimation, and then I will take the best one. But how do you decide which one you will pick according to this strategy? So you see that in order to do that, you need to keep some data in order to tell which polynomial is better than another. So the first thing we will do is we will split the data set in two. One will be called the training set, and the other one will be called the validation set. On the training set, you can do exactly what we just said. For each degree, 0, 1, 2, 3, you do the best possible estimation of your polynomial. And now to decide which one of these polynomials you will pick, you will take your validation set and see if the error is small on this validation set. Okay, so let's see how it goes. So I'm defining here my training set in orange and or perhaps the opposite. So the training set is blue and the validation set is in orange. Now I will compute the error both on the training set and on the validation set. So for this, you see that now I'm doing the fit of the polynomial only on the training set, and I'm computing the error both on the training set and on the validation set here. I will obtain two curves. So here is what I'm obtaining. So as a function of the degree, the blue curves correspond to the training error. So clearly the training error is decreasing because you have more and more freedom in your polynomial to fit all the points. So you start from an horizontal line, then a non-horizontal line, then a quadratic curve, and so on. So your training error will decrease as you increase the expressive power of your polynomial. But what is perhaps surprising here is you see that the error on the validation set starts to decrease and then jumps to a very high value. And it's pretty easy to understand why. So here I'm fitting on the orange point with a very high degree polynomial. And you see that my polynomial is okay with the orange point because it goes through all the points, but it's making huge error on the blue point. For example, here, at the extremity, and over there. And this is exactly why you have a huge error on this orange curve over there. So here is a more formal way to analyze this. For low degree polynomial, your parametric model is not expressive enough to capture the true model. So you have a high error, both on the training and on the validation set. For high degrees, then your model is very expressive, so you can basically fit the noise on your dataset so that your training error is very small and your validation is high. So now, based on this, you need to decide which polynomial you want to pick. So what seems to be a clever idea is to pick actually a polynomial which which is optimal for the validation error. So it's not over there, it's not over there, it's around here, and actually between 3 and 4. So you see that here we are recovering the true degree of my model without knowing it, just by this bit on the train on validation, and doing carefully the fit on the train, and then looking at the validation error on my validation set. You can be a little bit more formal if you want to understand deeply what's happening here. And it's connected to what people call decision theory. So for this, the first thing you need to introduce is the notion of risk here of an estimator. So in my case, the risk is just the average of the quadratic loss on a new sample, x and y, where x is just, I took it uniform on -2, 2, and y is given by my polynomial plus some random noise. Okay, so this average here is with respect to the randomness of the big X and big Y. Now, I'm defining what is called different hypothesis spaces, HK, where K is the maximum degree of my polynomial in HK. So, clearly, what I'd like to find is the best polynomial among all possible polynomials, minimizing this risk for my problem. And in my very simple case, it's very easy to compute this quantity actually. This is just the variance of the noise in my model, because I can use this polynomial, which is the true polynomial used in my model, and then I will cancel this term or just get the noise. So the minimum risk is obtained for the true polynomial and will achieve a risk which is equal to the variance of the noise in my model. The problem is, in practice, you do not have access to this risk function. You don't know the model. Otherwise, you will not need to estimate it. So what you do is you try to approximate this function with what is called the empirical risk, which is replacing this average by an average over your dataset. Indeed, what we did is not computing only one empirical risk, we did compute two empirical risks. One where the average here is taken on the training set, and one, which is denoted by rtrain, and one where the average here is taken on the validation set, which is rval. So now, instead of minimizing, trying to find the polynomial minimizing the risk, we want to find the polynomial minimizing this empirical risk on the training set. So just using the point in the training set. So this is denoted by this at P of k, which is the minimum of my empirical risk on the training set among all polynomial of degree at most k. So this is the training error that is depicted in blue here is exactly this quantity, the empirical risk on the validation set. Okay. Now what is the orange curve here? It's exactly the empirical risk of this optimal solution on the validation set. So rval of p at k. So our hope is that this quantity actually is close to the true risk evaluated at this particular solution. But indeed, this is not exactly what we want to compute. What we want to compute is not this p hat of k, but this p star of k, which is the minimum of the true risk on all the polynomial of degree at most k. What we show in our experiment is that, unfortunately, this p hat of k and p star of k are not the same, especially for large value of k. And most of the time, people decompose the risk of our estimator in three different term. So the risk of the solution found by your algorithm is the sum of this first term, which is the difference in terms of risk between the solution found by your algorithm and the best possible solution among those you search on, which is this P star of k. So this is called the estimation error. Then you have another component, which is the difference in terms of risk between this approximation on the hypothesis space and the true minimum for the risk. So this is called the approximation error, and then this is the true minimum risk. So clearly, as k increases, so you have more and more expressive power for your polynomial. So the hypothesis space is growing bigger and bigger. You will see that this quantity will decrease to this one. So the approximation error will go to 0 when k is big enough. But unfortunately, because we do not have access to this P star of k, but only to this P hat of k, it turns out that this estimation error will start increasing when k is too large. So that in the end, your risk, also this term is decreasing when k is large, this term is decreasing, so you end up with a U-shaped curve, and this is of course the best thing you can ever do. So in our case, you can compute explicitly the risk. So this R of P star k, P hat k, and R of P star k. Actually, I did the R of P hat k here. So this is with this integral. And for the P star k, you need to do the math, and I didn't have time to do all the math, so I left as an exercise the case to compute this optimal risk for k equals to 2, when the maximal degree is 2. So here is what you obtain. So again, as a function of the degree, the estimation error is in red. So you see that it starts very low and it increases with k. So this is exactly what we just said. This P hat of k is trying to, when k is large, is fitting the noise. So it's very different from this P star of k. So this is why it's blowing up when k is big. In green, you have the approximation error. The approximation error is a decreasing function of k. Okay. And actually, in our case, we know that as soon as you consider a degree of a polynomial of degree at least 3, the approximation error is 0. So you see that it's 0 over there. And in blue, here, it's empirical validation error. So the empirical validation error, you see that it's a U shape, as before. This is exactly this one. And you can compare it to the true one, so the risk of your estimator. And this is the empirical validation error. So this is the risk of P hat, and this is the R hat of P hat in blue. And you see that there is a nice fit between the two values. So you can use the empirical validation error as a surrogate for your risk of your estimator. And taking the minimum of this blue value is a sensible choice in terms of choosing your polynomial. So as you see, what I just described here is much more general than what's happening with deep learning. It's the general problem of underfitting or overfitting your model in machine learning. So when you have the expressive power is too small, you are on this side, then you are underfitting your model. On the right here, when it's too expressive, you are overfitting, and you need to find a balance between the two, which is over there.